The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening has gone down in history as one of the most special games in the entire series. Zelda was still somewhat discovering itself, and with this they threw away several key pillars of what made Zelda, Zelda, to see what remained. They got rid of Princess Zelda, they got rid of the Triforce, they got rid of Hyrule, they got rid of Ganon, yet the feeling of Zelda remained. It was off-kilter and felt more condensed and personal than what came before, but Nintendo succeeded in doing more than just putting Zelda on the Game Boy. This was something that could stand on its own, and nearly 3 decades later, it still does. But development was interesting. The team had just finished up on A Link to the Past, and Nintendo didn't immediately demand a Game Boy follow-up. In fact, no one higher up expected Zelda to come to the Game Boy. Link's Awakening started as a passion project by Kazuyaki Marita, who was previously object programmer on A Link to the Past. This caught the eye of Tezuka, A Link to the Past's director. In their own time, the two would begin messing around with Game Boy development kits and seeing what they could do with Zelda on such limited hardware. Despite the Game Boy being 8-bit like the NES, they were able to make a Zelda that looked and played more in line with the 16-bit offering. This little secret club started to attract more and more developers until it became an official project greenlit by management. Zelda was in production for Game Boy, but the unconventional origin of development shaped the direction. Nintendo simply allowed the developers to make a wacky passion project. You've probably heard variations of this story multiple times, and it's certainly relevant to the feel of Link's Awakening. It's a game that doesn't feel restrained by the boundaries of what came before, and borders on parodying them. We have other Nintendo characters, like Goombas, Piranha Plants, Chain Chomp, Luigi, and Princess Peach. Gordos appear early on, and Kirby himself takes the form of a regular enemy. Nintendo even squeezed in Dr. Wright from SimCity, which they developed and published themselves for Super Nintendo. All of these should be fairly recognizable to Western fans, but there's always been one little house that was a big question mark. This is Richard, and even growing up I knew this was some kind of cameo. Richard's villa has its own distinct theme, there's frogs hopping around for some unexplained reason, and the character is so striking, yet this is such a minor role. Richard is prince to the nearby castle Canlet, where Link must infiltrate, reclaim 5 feathers, and then return to Richard. He'll express his gratitude and give you the slime dungeon key. It's an exchange I've long lingered on, and recently I decided to learn exactly who Richard is by playing his game to completion. And it turns out that this game's not only important to uncovering a small Easter egg in Link's Awakening, but without it, Link's Awakening would either not exist, or be totally different to what it is we have today. Link's Awakening's development story is retold time and time again, but what's almost always left out is that it's built directly on top of, and excuse my pronunciation, Kawo Natame Nekane Wanao. This was a Game Boy game that predated Link's Awakening by a full year. We may have never received it ourselves in the West, but the legacy lived on. One character would pop up in Wario Land 3 and Wario Land 4, and the main character would get a prominent role in Super Smash Bros., starting with Smash for Wii U and 3DS. This is Prince Sable, another character I've been very curious about. Sometimes he's a snake, sometimes he's a frog, and if he touches you, you go in this giant dust cloud thing. And having now played the game, this is brilliant. It's a perfect love letter to what the character in the game is all about, but I spent 7 years just not getting it. I am late to this party. In 2011, a user known as Ryan took it upon themselves to fully translate the entire game. Kowo Natame Nakana Wanaru became The Frog the Bell Tolls. Although Smash Bros. Director Masahiro Sakurai had a slightly different translation when announcing the assist trophy through Miiverse, Nintendo's official title seems to be The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls. Many draw parallels to the novel of a similar name, For Whom the Bell Tolls. If you've never heard of this game, you might think, oh boy, John's talking about some obscure Japanese game again, but it was actually led by several incredibly prominent names. Development was handled by Nintendo R&D 1 with assistance from Intelligent Systems. On board were staff such as Yoshio Sakamoto, the director of the Metroid series, the late Gunpei Yokoi, a fellow Metroid alumni and also the inventor of the Game Boy, Toru Osawa, the man known for single-handedly developing Kid Icarus until the Metroid team came in to assist, and composing was Kozumi Totaka. This was only his second project, but he would go on to compose for games such as Animal Crossing, Link's Awakening, and Wii Sports. He would also hide Totaka's song in most of his projects, including this one. It's brought to us by an all-star cast, and having now played it, we in the West missed out hard. For a game completely in monochrome, it sure is full of colour. The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls tells the story of Prince Sable and Prince Richard. Think of these two as the rival dynamic that Pokemon were going to use 4 years later. Richard's the trash-talking trope, but deep down you're still friends on the same journey. The two are equal in every way, apart from combat, where Richard has a 56-0 record. However, as the duel ends with another Richard victory, his men run in to inform him that the Princess Tiramisu is missing and the castle has been seized. Both Prince Sable and Prince Richard rush off to the rescue. Though Sable's kicked off the ship because Richard wants to do this all on his own. But being a wealthy prince, Sable finds another ship and simply buys it from the captain. I love this stuff. You start off with 9,999,999 nuts, which is this game's currency, and through reckless spending you slowly start to just lose all of it. It's a cool way of making a prince feel a bit grounded. Anyway, you take the ship and set off on a voyage to rescue the princess before Richard can. But when you arrive on land and make your way through the town, it turns out Richard's already passed through, and you're one step behind. Thankfully, the castle isn't far. So this is where the game really starts, and you're probably thinking, like, what kind of game is this? Well, The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls is kind of in between genres. It's an adventure game first and foremost, quite like Zelda, but there's absolutely a slight dash of RPG DNA, like think an RPG without battles. Here's what I mean. As soon as you leave town, there's a couple of ways you can go. The castle's straight ahead, but it's guarded, and in order to get past, you've got to defeat the guard. And this is combat. Basically, you have no input. You just go into a dust cloud and both of your health bars start to drain until only one remains. You can pause it to run or use an item, but in this fight, we're gonna lose. We're just not strong enough. So what we can do instead is go right and take down these much weaker enemies. There's no experience to be earned, but there's something lingering just over there. Make your way down and you'll find a chest with a better sword. This gives us the power we need to take down the guard. It's a combat system built entirely around building yourself by exploring. And unless you have to, combat's generally something you want to avoid. The game manages to achieve so much with this simplicity, and it just gets better and better as it goes on. The game also predated Earthbound by 2 years, and may possibly be where the auto-win mechanic came from. If you're strong and fast enough to defeat an enemy in a single hit, you'll blow right through them. By now, you've probably noticed a couple of similarities to Link's Awakening. Given they're built on the same engine and framework, they of course look very similar, and if you're a font expert, you may have also noticed the font is the exact same. But there's another huge part of DNA the two share. When you make your way into the castle, the perspective changes. It goes from top-down to side-scroller. So, if you ever wondered why Link's Awakening and the Oracle games have these perspective shifts, it's because the coding was already there from The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls. The game changes perspective a lot, and in these side-scrolling sections, the prince gains a permanent jump button. The combat feels so well designed around the Game Boy's limitations. In Link's Awakening, you're constantly opening up the menu to change items. And while there are some items in this game, the core movement properties are present at all times. It's executed really well. This wasn't an adaptation or a follow-up to a console game, and I think having that blank slate really gave this game a leg up over other Nintendo Game Boy games. The platforming itself is great too. You can climb up edges, which is pretty rare for the time, and kinda like Doki Doki Panic, you can charge up your jump. Man, I love this climbing animation. So we've come to the castle to check on the princess, but there's not really much you can do here right now. Most rooms are locked off with doors that need different keys, so all you can do for now is open up a drawbridge and continue to explore the overworld. The castle is great though. You come back here multiple times over the course of the game and slowly unravel more of it. You can even see the final boss chamber right at the start of the game, though of course you don't have the key. I guess think Temple of the Ocean King, but much more prominent and you don't need to revisit areas again and again, so it's like that, but good. Anyway, following the drawbridge takes you to a town that's full of frogs. One even strangely follows you around, but you can't do anything with it. You might be wondering where all the humans are. And well, there's a bit of a surprise party in a nearby house. Yeah, they think you belong to the Crokian army, so they jump you in the dark and then take all your money. You might need to defeat a couple of enemies to get a bit more money, but this town sells saws. You can use these on the overworld to cut down trees and continue exploring. Saws are also essential for standing a chance against these tree enemies, because otherwise they will tear you apart. We get a very neat wink to Zelda 1's Lost Woods. The game even makes reference to it. But here is where things start to get deeper. So from here we visit a witch, and she tells us Richard has been here, and she gave him a potion, and this potion will help him take down Lord Dalaran, the person who's taken over the castle. So nothing suspicious here, right? We take it, and nothing happens. But wait, there's the guy who stole our money! We pursue him down a well, and while he manages to escape on a ledge, we're not so lucky. We fall into the water, and we drown. The end. Oh wait, now we're a frog. That's what the potion did. When you touch water, you turn into a frog, and for now, there is no way to reverse it. But it's not so bad being a frog. You can walk and jump underwater, which means we can reclaim our 1 million nuts. Thank you, thief! Your jumps are also way higher, both in and out of water. The downside is frogs are terrible in combat. So we return to the town, and now that we're a frog, we can understand the other frogs. Remember the frog that was following Prince Sable around town earlier? Well, that was Prince Richard. He also drank the potion, touched water, and became a frog. Being in the same situation, the two princes start to see eye to eye and work together. They make their way towards the castle and explore even further to find the princess. There was previously a water route that the prince just couldn't take. It would outright kill him. But now that you're a frog, hop straight through. What lies ahead is a pretty lengthy, but excellent showcase of the frog's platforming abilities. And the sprite work, it's just fantastic. You'll get another key opening up even more of the castle, but still no sign of the princess. With nothing more to do here, we go back to the witch and confront her, forcing her to turn us back into a human. And she does, for a price. All of your nuts. As in, she demands the exact amount on your person, or on your frog. Much like the previous potion, this does nothing at first, but it has given you an advantage. Unlike Richard, you're no longer a permanent frog. You can freely turn back to being human by eating a joy fruit, or by dying. Other than being taken back to the previous town, there's no penalty for death, but it still hurts your feelings. Now this is where the game really changes. Not only is it now a game about juggling both your human form and your frog form, but you can buy eggs in the next town, turning you into a snake. Snakes can slide through tight gaps and turn enemies into blocks using their poisonous venom, a common trait of snakes, of course. So now there's another ball in the ring: human form, snake form, and frog form. The game was already clever and incredibly charming up until now, but the freedom to transform totally elevates the world and puzzle design. You can be a human or a snake whenever you want, but to be a frog, you need water. There's times where you need the frog, but you can't make your way through, so you open up the path as a human. I like this puzzle. So there's these two enemies, and as a snake you have to bite them to turn them into blocks, but only the human can push the blocks. So figuring that out is part of the puzzle, but it's not the complete one. You push the bottom one until it just kinda hangs off the edge, and then the higher one goes on top of that, giving you just enough height to make the jump. Bug enemies are pretty strong, and generally you want to avoid them. But partway through the game I discovered that the frog can just eat them up. It's not only a one-hit kill, but it gives you more health. From here, all of navigation is a puzzle of forms, and it's all just really clever stuff. The whole game is full of so much charm. There's one point where you can't progress because there's boulders in the way, so you return to town, and it turns out someone set up a ferry service. You get to board and control the boat for around 3 screens, and what's really interesting is there's an original sprite for this boat too. There's so much care for mere seconds of screen time. When you dock on land, you find Nintendo. Here there's a scientist on the R&D team who can make you a very special glove to lift up the boulders. But he only talks to people with the same tastes as him. So you go to the cafeteria and there are 3 options of food you can order. If you pick the sushi, he'll talk to you. If you pick anything else, he'll call you a tasteless loser. So it turns out he loves wasabi, but the Crokian army have taken over the wasabi field. So you've got to infiltrate and get him some, and then he'll give you the glove. This may sound like a weird and pointless detour on the quest, and the game has a few moments like this. But what's great is all these strange detours come back to serve the core narrative in a really rewarding way. Everything has value, and by the end it really feels like a culmination of all your efforts. The game's really brief too. Took me around 5.5 hours, and it's just moment-to-moment adventure. There's no downtime or fluff, and the parts that may seem like fluff initially serve a much grander purpose. And that's most likely why people aren't begging for a sequel to this game. Unlike most other mediums, most game franchises are expected to have a follow-up. Many movies and books can release standalone, but for some reason games are just expected to have sequel after sequel. But The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls just feels complete. It's a complete story, the gameplay explores everything it needs to, and it's all wrapped up in one short but unforgettable adventure. There could be a sequel someday, but it really doesn't need one. I won't summarize any more of the story in case you want to play the game yourself, but it's just really good. Over the years, Mario and Zelda get a lot of deserved admiration, but Nintendo have released hundreds of other games, and this one may be locked behind a region barrier, but it really is just as good as Mario and Zelda. Many Game Boy games feel a little compromised. In Link's Awakening, the two buttons didn't quite cut it, and you end up pausing the game a lot. Metroid 2 is very closed in, and enemies just kind of freeze when they're not in your field of view. Mario Land 1 and 2, great games, but their physics are strange. But The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls wasn't an adaptation. A group of talented people wondered what a game built from the ground up for the Game Boy would look and play like, and it completely delivered. It was so good that the Foundation created the next Zelda game. Without this, Link's Awakening wouldn't play like it does now. It wouldn't have the side-scrolling moments, and maybe the jump would be cut too. An entire line of design choices just wouldn't have happened. That's the importance of this little house. To many of us in the West, this is just a kooky villa filled with frogs and a catchy tune. But when you know of The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls, it changes not only your perspective of this scene, but the entirety of Link's Awakening. Maybe one day things will come full circle, and The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls will get a remake on Link's Awakening's engine. I hope one day this game gets an official localization. It's one of my new favourite Game Boy games, and one of Nintendo's very best. Well, thank you for watching the full video. I always really appreciate it. Link's Awakening is a very special game to me, and just witnessing what came before makes me appreciate not only The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls, but I now appreciate this game even more too. But really, this doesn't live in the shadow of Link's Awakening, it stands on its own. So I hope some of you guys give it a go yourselves. But if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below, and of course go to that subscribe button and transform it into a frog, and we'll see you next time. Bye everyone.